Everybody, welcome back to One Seed, One World. So in past videos, like the one I did on Blossom End Rot or the one that I did on Epsom salts, I've often talked about not spending your money on putting extra additives in the soil when you don't need it, and that you should do a soil test first to see if you are actually deficient in different nutrients before you go and buy a bunch of stuff that is often marketed to us gardeners and homesteaders, telling you that you need to buy all these things. So your best bet, if you think you might be deficient in something, or if you are unsure, or if you're going to try a new plant that requires maybe a different type of pH in your soil. For example, blueberries like a higher acidic soil than, say, tomatoes. So before you start planting something in a certain area, you might want to test your soil. Also, if you're having problems, yellowing leaves, curling leaves, different things might come up, you might want to check your soil and see if you're actually deficient in something, or if it's something else that's more simple, like you didn't water enough, or you watered it too much, or it's been too hot, or there's a blight coming through, like a fungal infection that might not necessarily be a deficiency in the soil. So there's all kinds of things on the market that you can buy, all different types of soil test kits. In a lot of areas, you can also go to your local ag department and have them test the soil, or you take them an actual soil sample and they'll test it for you. Some places it's really cheap, other places it's more expensive. Sometimes it's easier to kind of do it yourself. Now, I am not affiliated with any soil test kits or any ag departments for that matter, but this is one I wanted to show you today that I purchased, and we're going to do some soil tests. This is a rapid test soil test kit by LusterLeaf. I am not familiar with this one. This is the first time I'm using it, so we're going to try it out today together. The thing that first attracted me to this particular product, one, it had a lot of good customer reviews, and two, it gives you 4 different types of tests that you can do. It says it comes with 40 tests, and what that actually is 10 tests each of 4 different types of soil tests that you can do. So before we test it, let's go over the 4 tests that are included in this particular kit. First test is for nitrogen. Why do you need to test your nitrogen? Nitrogen is what's responsible for leafy greens. Things like your lettuce, your kale, your Swiss chard, all those kinds of things. But all your other plants need it as well. Things like tomatoes, peppers, basically all plants need nitrogen. It helps them form the good foliage. So if you are deficient in nitrogen, it can cause yellowing leaves, stunted growth, and those kinds of things. If you have an overabundance of nitrogen, then it can cause delays in the flowering of your plants, poor quality fruit production. Basically, like for example, you might end up with a really beautiful green tomato plant that doesn't really produce hardly any tomatoes for you, or if they do, the tomatoes aren't so great. So, you want to check and make sure that you are in balance with your nitrogen. You don't want too much, you don't want too little. Number 2 is a test for phosphorus. What do you need phosphorus for? Phosphorus helps with the overall strength of the plant. It also helps in seed development and making your seeds more fertile if you're saving seeds for later. If you are deficient in phosphorus, then you might have seeds that aren't so great, that might not sprout the next year or have other issues. If you have too much phosphorus, that can cause other issues as well. It's one of those nutrients that all the plants need, but we need a balance. We don't want too much or too little. The next test is for potash or potash, depending on where you live and how you pronounce it. This is something you can get potash fertilizer, or you can also get it just by taking ashes out of your fireplace and sprinkling around in your garden. That's kind of where it comes from, and it's potassium and vitamin K that is in potash, however you want to say it. But it helps with the production of your fruit and the fruit yield. If you are deficient in potash, you may have issues with getting a good, healthy, big crop. You may have a much smaller crop if you are deficient in potash, so we can test that level as well. The final one is for pH, and that tests whether your soil is acidic or alkaline, the alkalinity or the acidity of your soil. And every plant has its own pH preference. Normally it's in a range, and generally a lot of your garden vegetables are kind of all in the same range. Things like tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, whatever, you know, they kind of all fall within a specific range. Normally they're a little bit closer to the alkaline side. Whereas other things like blueberries or rhododendrons prefer a more acidic soil. And so if you're planting those kind of things, it's good to know what your pH levels are to see if your soil has the proper acidic levels to plant a blueberry bush, and will it do well. Because if you don't have a more acidic soil, then the blueberries might not produce as well. But there are different amendments that you can add to, you know, help increase that. But you won't know unless you do a pH test. But in general, with all these things, garden soils, unless you live like in a desert, probably have most of the nutrients that your garden needs. Now you can definitely help improve on that by adding things like compost or different manures and fertilizers, green manure, things like if you grow, say, winter wheat, and in the springtime turn it under, it kind of makes a green compost. I particularly myself use rabbit poop because it's one of the best things that you can use, and I have a rabbit. But horse manure, cow manure, chicken manure, once they've been composted down, they all work as well and will add these different nutrients to your soil and help improve your overall soil health. But you know, sometimes if you run into an issue, you might want to check and see where your levels are at. Or you might just be curious like me. So let's go do some soil tests. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're just going to do one test today, and we're going to do the easiest one, or the one that takes the least amount of time, and that's the pH test. They give you these capsules, these pills, and they're color-coded to match. You can see green to green, and each of the tests have a color-coded capsule to go with the color-coded container. From there, the instructions, I'm not going to go through them all. They're very clear though. They walk you through every step, and there's a chart and everything that shows you where you should be at and what you're looking for. And their instructions also let you know like where you should be if you're testing for vegetables versus fruit trees, grasses, those kinds of things. So it breaks it down for you. There's a lot of information in this chart. As you can see, it's pretty long, or in these instructions, there's a lot. There's more information on the back. So they walk you through it though. It's not difficult, but the other three tests take a little while, so we won't go through all that today. We'll just do the pH test since that's pretty quick. Okay, so I've got my dirt in here up to the fill line. There's different recommendations for the depth that you would pull your soil sample from, somewhere between 2 and 4 inches depending on what you are testing, but you know, the instructions are in the book. So I got my soil in there. So now we're going to add a capsule in there. You have to basically open the capsule and add the contents in, and they do say that you may need a pair of scissors to open it if it won't untwist for you. So I'm just going to kind of, I think what I'll do is tap that a little bit, make sure all the stuff's down at the bottom. All right, lost a little bit. Add the contents. Sorry, my hand was in the way, but I just shook all the contents in. So you can kind of see I've got the contents of the capsule on top of the dirt. Now we need to fill it up with the water to the fill line. They also provide a dropper for this, but I'm just using bottled water, so it was easy enough to pour in. Got our water in there. I'm going to put the cap back on, if I can. Make sure that's on tight and shake it up. So now that I've shaken it up and let it sit for a little while, you can kind of see how the color of the liquid matches that right there, which is showing my pH is about 6.5 or slightly acidic. So that was the soil test for pH. Now, I misspoke earlier when I said that your general vegetables want a alkaline soil. That's not really correct. All plants vary to some small extent, but things like tomatoes don't like really acidic soil. They like something that's closer to neutral. But with my soil being at 6.5, tomatoes like a soil that is 6.2 up to like 6.8. So I'm kind of right in the range. Neutral soil would be at 7. So I'm right in that range. They're just slightly under the neutral range at very slightly acidic. And so my tomatoes are in good soil. So I know this was kind of maybe a little all over the place. I hope not too much. I hope you found this information helpful. But I just kind of wanted to show you what your options are for doing soil tests at home. They aren't that hard. You know, most of these tests come with plenty of instructions and recommendations on if you have deficiencies and whatnot. Plus you can Google what your different plants that you're growing like and get plenty of information out there for a particular plant or plant problem that you may be having. But it's always good to, you know, do a little soil test yourself, a little science experiment at home, and you can learn about your soil. So one thing that they do recommend is to use distilled water. I use spring water. That may have slightly changed the pH, possibly by a hair or two, but probably not by much. They also recommend that you take soil samples from different parts of your garden, because it can vary from area to area. Or if you, like me, do mainly raised beds, you might want to do a different test in each one of your raised beds to see if there is a difference there. If you've added different things, like maybe you added more wood ash to one bed or more rabbit poop to another bed or whatever, because I certainly, you know, I don't measure things when I come out here and start dumping it in the beds over the winter time to prepare it for spring. So you can always check different parts of your soil. But that's it, soil test. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them below. But whatever's going on in your neck of the woods, I hope that it's working out fantastic for you and that you are having a great day. Thanks for hanging out again with me today, and we will see you again soon. Namaste.